In this video I'm going to talk to you about how to do quote chains. So in the quote chain there are three links. One is contrasting, one is corroborating, and one is connecting. Contrasting means offering the opposite perspective in this case. So black would contrast with white. Corroborating, the robo bit comes from the same place as robust. If you corroborate something, you strengthen it, so you back it up, in other words. And connecting means to link from one thing to another. So the idea is that you are going to look at a quote from one of the texts that you're studying, and then you can work through these three links to make your chain as follows. So if we think about the sign of 4, Sherlock Holmes says in chapter 1, he says, my mind rebels at stagnation. So your first job is to choose a quote that you want to make a chain for, and this is Holmes in chapter 1. My mind rebels at stagnation. So now what you need to do is come up with 3 words that describe Holmes at this point. So what does this tell us about Holmes? How is he feeling at that moment? What is he presented as at that moment? So I'm going to say he is presented as being frustrated. He is presented as being bored and quite stubborn as well. Like, he's obviously said this a lot. He's stubborn. He refuses to, if he's bored, if he's fed up, he will just turn to his cocaine. He won't try and find another outlet. So that's my first quote, and they're the words that describe Holmes at that point. Now, if I look up, I need to think of a contrasting quote. So you might choose to use a different colour. Now, what I'm looking for is a moment in Holmes's story, in the sign of 4, where he is the opposite of this. So when is he not frustrated? When is he not bored? When is he not stubborn? When is his mind not rebelling at stagnation? Well, the obvious moment would be when Mary Morstan comes in. So up here we can write down contrasting, because this is our contrasting quote. And I'm going to say it's the bit where it says that Holmes rubbed his hands and his eyes, I made my box a bit small, glistened. So it says Holmes rubbed his hands and his eyes glistened. Now this is not someone who is frustrated or bored or stubborn. This is someone, and I'm going to write my new words for him, who is excited, who is keen, who is intrigued by life. He's enthused by it. He's keen to get going. So now I've got in my quote chain my original quote, and then I've linked it with a contrasting quote. Now you might have more than one of these, but for now we'll just go with that one. Now we go back to our quote chain. Contrasting we've done, tick in green. Now we look at corroborating. So if you corroborate something, you prove it to be the case, basically. You back it up. So if somebody was to corroborate your story, it would mean they backed up your story. So if you said you were somewhere, for example, they would back you up. So I need a quote that backs this image of Holmes up. When else is he like this? So we've done when he's not. When else is he like this? Well, let's face it, a fair amount. So if I put in corroborating, I'm going to choose the moment when, it's chapter 8, and it's when the case comes to a halt, and it says his face was dark and troubled. Now, you could say that he's a little bit worried there, but really, it's frustration again, and boredom. And he's a little bit stubborn at this point because he's refusing to look at it any other way other than being an abject failure. I can think of another one that corroborates it. And this is Watson this time, who says that Holmes looks worn and haggard when the case isn't going very well. So these quotes corroborate these ideas, and I can also add some more words now. So not only can he sometimes be frustrated, bored and stubborn, he can also be quite negative in the way that he looks at situations. Sometimes he falls into those dark moments, which, as Watson points out, Watson calls them his black moods. So he does, when he's not all excited and keen with a case. Now, all that remains in our quote chains, we've done our corroborating, contrasting, corroborating, and now we're going to look at connecting. Now, the connecting quotes will be, let's do these in black. Connecting is all about linking this quote, or any of these quotes, connecting them to themes. So this is where you broaden out from the quotes you've been looking at and you connect it to themes. So these, obviously, all of these, because they're about homes, they would link in if you had an essay on science v romance, if you had an essay on, excuse me, detection and deduction. They would be most useful, though, for an essay on Holmes himself and the contrasting sides of his character. Second example, we'll go with the same principle. If we were to look at Romeo, from Romeo and Juliet, and I'm going to choose the quote, it is the East and Juliet is the sun. It is the East and Juliet is the sun. I don't need a speech bubble and quotation marks, but there you go. It is the East and Juliet is the sun. What does this, remember I need my words, so what does this quote tell me about Romeo? It tells me that he is, he's romantic, he's a bit of an idealist, he is hopeful, like he's talking about her as if she's the sun, as if she's the dawning of some new day. We also, he uses well, you could say he's a bit hyperbolic. Is that a word? Hyperbolic? I think it is. He uses hyperbole. This is a bit over the top. I mean, it's because he's obviously a romantic idealist. But so this is Romeo at this point. So our next phase is, in the green, contrasting. So we need to think of a quote that offers a completely different side to Romeo than these words here. Well, the obvious one to choose would be when he takes revenge for the death of Mercutio. And then I might choose the bit where he says, away to heaven, respective, excuse my hand, I'm left-handed, respective lenity, away to heaven, respective lenity. That is him basically pushing away all of this romantic ideals, all the romantic ideals in his head. He's pushing away this idea of there being any hope. It's a completely different Romeo to what we're used to. So you might call him at this point, well, he's certainly violent. He's changed quite a lot at this point. He wants to draw down fire-eyed fury, remember? He's being quite a realist, or at least he's living in the moment. He's a little bit despairing rather than hopeful, you could say. So I've got one side of Romeo and I've got a second side of Romeo. Next part of the chain is the corroborating. Well, I mean, if you need to well, you should be able to think of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There should be a lot of quotes in your memory bank that link into the idea of Romeo being a romantic idealist. I mean, pretty much everything he says to Juliet you could have in here, especially if you're looking at when he uses this sort of hyperbolic language where he goes over the top. I mean, she doth teach the torches to burn bright and the pilgrim's hands. There's a lot you could say. But hopefully this has given you an idea of how you might go about revising using quote chains. So the key is you choose a quote, you challenge yourself to think of something contrasting for that quote, you think of some corroborating quotes, and then finally you link it to the themes of the play. So these, for example, If we are connecting, we would link to the theme of love, clearly. We might also link to the theme of youth, and we might link to the theme of masculinity. I hope that helps.